Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to this Telemus webinar. It's May 22nd, and we are a few days away from Memorial Day weekend 2019. Hopefully, people have some plans. My name is Oliver Stahl. I'm an Associate Financial Life Advisor here at Telemus. For those of you who didn't already know, Telemus is a registered investment advisor offering help in the areas of wealth advisory, investment management, and integrated insurance. Today, I'm excited to share with you that I'm here with Brandon Thompson. Brandon is an attorney with the Darren Finley Law Firm. Brandon specializes in cases surrounding elder law, long-term care planning, and veteran benefits. Brandon, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and that's what my practice really centers around. I help people typically that are elderly or disabled face their challenges that come with, aging in this country essentially, or being disabled. So that's really what my practice centers around, that and estate planning.
So what we're going to do is Brandon has a bit of a presentation for us, so we're going to go through it. Just a note before we get started here, as we go along today, if you have any questions or if you think of anything as we go through this presentation, you feel free to type in your question into the chat box, into the control panel, and we will make sure to cover it at the end with a brief Q&A. So Brandon, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we're just going to go over the basics of elder law, essentially. And a lot of times the question I get is, okay, well, what is elder law, right? And why does it even matter? I mean, people have sort of heard of the term sometimes, but a lot of times people don't really understand what it's actually about. And really what it is, I mean, technically speaking, it's legal issues that face our aging and disabled population. But the way I like to frame it is estate planning is really what happens to my stuff or my assets or me when I die, right? Elder law is more of what happens to me or my things or where do I go if I live, right? So I'm not dead, but something's happening to me that's affecting my life. And I'm here practicing in Michigan, but like everywhere else in the United States, people are just living much longer nowadays. I mean, you can look at it as that's sort of good news, but the bad news is that with this new wave of aging, people living a lot longer than they used to, we're having more of an incidence of things like chronic medical conditions, most notably things like dementia. And I've got to live it and see it firsthand with my own sweet grandmother who is suffering from dementia. And that's another question that I get asked sometimes too is, why did I get into elder law? That's one of the main reasons as my own family member. And also, I used to work just real quick for a frozen food delivery company, Schwann's, and a lot of my clients were elderly. And I did it even when I was in law school. And I just remembered them being, my elderly clients being such great people, but they faced so many issues that there weren't answers to. So that's really why I got into it. So today I'm just going to go over some basics and some points that I think are important for people to know about. So one thing I hear from clients a lot is that I need to avoid probate, right? When I die, I don't want my assets to go to probate. Probate can be very relevant, though. And when I say probate, I mean the probate court while you're alive as well. And the reason is like I mentioned, if you start having some chronic medical conditions like dementia, or you're not yourself anymore, we got to start thinking about, well, who's going to step in your shoes and who's going to make decisions, right? And if you don't have something like a durable power of attorney for finances or a medical power of attorney, really our only option in that situation, if you are truly incapacitated and need somebody to make your medical or financial decisions, is the guardianship court and the conservatorship, or having a conservator in the local probate court. And we can help with that, but I think it's much better to have people make that decision in lieu of having to go to court and having everything be public, and pick the people that you want to make those decisions. So usually I tell a lot of my clients, first things first, even if you're a little bit younger, we have to make sure that we have some good powers of attorney in place. Now, the first one I'll start with is your financial power of attorney. Now, financial power of attorney is a pretty standard document. A lot of people have them. The reason it's important to have a tailored financial power of attorney for yourself, though, with elder law in mind, is the standard power of attorney that I look at a lot of times has a lot of restrictions on it, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, typically, if you're a little bit younger and you make a power of attorney, you don't want your power of attorney to be able to give your assets away or do some of the things that we have to do sometimes in an elder law situation. But when we come into scenarios sometimes where somebody gets sick and they maybe need long-term care, sometimes we need that power of attorney to be able to make a trust for somebody, or to move assets into one of those trusts, or plan to get on some type of needs-based benefit like a VA veterans benefit, or a Medicare benefit. So it's important that even if you already have a financial power of attorney, it's important to make sure it's fresh, to make sure that it has all of the powers and authority in there that we might need in the future for your loved ones to be able to protect your assets or make sure your wishes are followed. Otherwise, a lot of times when people come to me in a crisis and they don't have proper powers of attorney, it's either because they're not being accepted by the financial institution or the bank because it's not fresh enough, or it doesn't have specific enough powers, or we're restricted by that power of attorney. It says we can't make trust, or we can't make changes to financial plans, or things that we actually need to do in that situation. So our only remedy in that spot is to go to court. And that can be expensive, and you never know if the judge is going to approve what we're trying to get done. The second part, I mean, really nowadays after the Affordable Care Act, is that medical power of attorney. If you're going to the hospital or the doctors, you've probably been asked about it. Do you have a power of attorney or a patient advocate designation? So I like to reiterate how important those are. They're very simple documents, but it's very important that you have somebody in place to make those day-to-day medical decisions for you and your specific wishes. Do you want to stay at home? Your end-of-life decisions. What do you want to happen specifically in those spots? And we don't like to think about death. We don't like to think about getting sick and having to have somebody else make end-of-life decisions. But I can tell you it's a lot better having those decisions made beforehand, and having your loved ones know what those are, rather than you actually being incapacitated and nobody knows what to do. That's a very difficult place for people to be in, and sometimes it leads to fighting. So I always say 2 very simple documents to get started with. Just put some solid financial and medical powers of attorney. And when I'm talking about elder law, when we say elder law attorneys, us as elder law lawyers, we're sort of a small community, and we want to make sure that these documents are looked at from an elder law perspective, not just your standard powers of attorney that you could get from the internet or whatnot. You want to make sure they're very specific, and the elder law attorney knows what they're doing and what the law is. So I brought up a point about capacity, and this is an issue that our aging population faces so often nowadays. Frankly, every week, I think I'm dealing with some type of capacity issue, right? Mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, they're slipping a little bit mentally. They're not really themselves anymore, but sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And they want to make changes to their estate plan, or they want to make changes to their financial plan, or they want to change their power of attorney or whatnot. And we sort of get in a situation where we think, well, do they understand it enough? How much capacity do they have to sign legal documents? And what I like to say in this situation is, I'll borrow a quote from Edwin Boyer here. Capacity is a fluid concept. It's much like a lava lamp, and that's very true. A lot of my clients, if I catch them on a good day at 10 a.m., they can tell me their life story. They can tell me who their family is, what their wishes are, and if at that point in time of the day they understand what's going on, they have the capacity to sign a document or to make decisions, even if later that day they don't remember or they forget. So it's a very fluid, not black and white concept when it comes to capacity. And also you have to be very careful, because I have a lot of very well-intentioned children or family members that try to sort of step in and make decisions for their parents, which is good usually, but we still have to remember and respect that elders um, individual ability to make their own legal decisions if they can. Also, a lot of people think that when you get a medical opinion from a doctor that somebody has dementia or they're incapacitated, that means it's over. That person cannot make legal decisions anymore. That's absolutely not true. Um, a medical opinion is just a medical opinion. And until a judge rules on your capacity and like you get a guardian or a conservator or you're deemed disabled, that's sort of like what I like to say where your adult card is revoked, unfortunately. You can still make legal decisions if a lawyer assesses you and feels that you have the legal capacity to make those decisions. So the next step is really what I'm going to focus on is long-term care planning. Now, as an elder law attorney, I face a lot of issues: Social Security, disability, Medicare, veterans, all that stuff. But a lot, to be honest with you, a lot of what my work is focused on nowadays is this long-term care continuum, we'll call it. Okay, so our system, unfortunately, is broken right now when it comes to seniors in this country. And people are getting stuck in this long-term care continuum. So let's just use an example. Let's say mom or dad is getting sick, all of a sudden they have a fall, they end up in the hospital. All right, so Medicare will pay for that because it's healthcare, and Medicare is going to pay for things that you can rehab from or things that can be fixed. Let's say you're stabilized and they send you off to a rehab nursing home because you're not good enough to go home yet, but you're stable enough not to be in the hospital. So at that point in time is usually when people are calling me because mom or dad's not going to be able to go home anytime soon. They're running out of Medicare rehab days because they're going to cap you usually at 100 days. And now all of a sudden they're in a long-term care facility and they have to pay lots of money to stay there. And they want to know how they can protect some assets and not lose everything, essentially. So I try to get people to avoid that by doing some pre-planning. But we do have good crisis planning. That's what I call it when people come in a crisis. We do have ways to actually pay for that care without losing everything. And I'm going to go over some of those ways right now. So you're in a long-term care facility. Usually that's considered a nursing home. I want to back it up a little bit. Sometimes there is a big continuum from staying home, going to an assisted living, or ultimately ending up in a nursing home. But today I'm really going to focus on the nursing home care because that's where a lot of my clients end up. So the first way is pretty simple. You private pay. So if you have the independent wealth or assets, and that's what I will mention later in this webinar about the importance of financial planning, especially with Telemis. But the first option is if you have the wealth to pay for your care, then you pay for it. So that's straightforward. The second way is kids pay, and sometimes some of my clients do have independent wealth to help pay, but most of the time, kids are usually paying in this situation with their time. Usually it's a son or a daughter, grandkid that's visiting the lawyer, visiting the financial planner, going to the nursing home, and it's a lot of work for them. So they're paying with their time and effort, and that's something I see every day in my practice is family members helping out. So that's why it's very important as well to have a good plan in place so your loved ones know what your plan is to follow it and get you that care. The next step is Medicare. Now, Medicare will pay for very limited amounts of care, usually, like I said earlier, rehab care. But once you are deemed a long-term care patient or something you're not going to rehab from, you are now a long-term care patient in Medicare, HAP, Blue Cross, whoever. They're going to step back and say, this is not healthcare anymore. You're sort of on your own. The next one is long-term care insurance. I do suggest that people look into things like long-term care insurance. Unfortunately, a lot of my clients don't have it when they reach the point of getting sick. So I'll skip over that. The next one is veterans benefits. There are some great veterans benefits that can help pay for care in an assisted living or nursing home or home care. The one that we usually focus on is the VA aid and attendance benefit. It's a non-service connected benefit that can help veterans that have served during certain periods of wartime and meet some asset and income standards. I'm not going to go really deep into that today because we have limited time. But if you are a veteran or your spouse is a veteran, there's some great great opportunities and benefits out there that a lot of people are not even aware of. And now the last one is Medicaid. Now, when Medicaid was designed, really was designed as a health insurance program for lower income or asset folks. The way we're using it now in this country is sort of like Frankenstein. We've really expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. And unfortunately, it's really turning into one of our primary payers, care payers for our long-term care patients in this country, especially the elderly folks. The only problem is that the old school Medicaid rules still really apply, meaning you have to be broke or not really have much to receive the benefits. So what happens to a lot of my clients is they get in a situation where they are receiving long-term care, they have some assets, assets they've worked very hard for, and whether it's a vacation home up north or a family farm or properties or a business, or they have a spouse at home that needs to live in the community still, and now they're facing, possibly $120,000 a year in medical costs. The average, right now nationwide is around $100,000 a year. In Michigan, it's around $8,000 a month, and that's just the average. If you're looking at certain counties or the nicer areas where there's long-term care facilities, I have clients facing, $10, $12, $15,000 a month bills. And even if you've built up some wealth, that can add up very fast, and it can be very scary for somebody who, especially if there's a spouse that's still living in a community. So, what I do with clients is we call it Medicaid planning, and really what that means in a nutshell is we are helping folks achieve Medicaid eligibility without having to spend down or lose all of their assets. And it's all above board and legal. I always compare it to, if my accountant were to say to me or my CPA, hey, we can, follow these tax rules in a certain type of way and you pay less taxes. Well, it's very similar in the Medicaid world. We can use certain rules and certain strategies to achieve Medicaid eligibility for maybe a spouse, and that way we can protect the assets for the community spouse that's still in the community. But most of the time, my clients are looking at crisis planning because they haven't pre-planned. And somebody's gotten sick and they're calling me and they're saying, what do we do with these assets? How do we pay for that care? So just real quick, basic income and asset rules. Generally speaking, across the country and in Michigan, you can only have $2,000 in countable assets. So what's a countable asset? Well, a countable asset is any asset that has a cash value that's not otherwise excluded. Well, what does that mean? Well, the state of Michigan and most other states say you can keep certain assets and they won't count them. One house, one car, certain funeral and prepaid burial contracts, personal property, and that's pretty much it. Everything else they're going to count. And then there's that 5-year look-back rule. Basically what they say is within 5 years you cannot have moved assets around by gifting them or giving them to other people or certain types of trust, and then apply for Medicaid, right? So so when we're looking at pre-planning, a lot of times we have to make sure we are outside of that 5-year look-back window. Okay, so as you can see, when we get into the crisis planning situation, our options can be a little bit, actually, a lot more restricted, in that situation because of that 5-year look back. Now, there are plans where we can work with that rule, but what I want to focus on more in this situation is our pre-planning. So I have a lot of clients that come to me when they're healthier, maybe they're at retirement age or just after retirement, and they want to ask, okay, Brandon, my mom or dad got really sick. They went to a nursing home. They lost money. It was very stressful. What can we do beforehand to get in front of this to maybe protect certain assets that they have that they absolutely don't want to lose, or to make sure they're not one spouse is not impoverished? So that's what I call pre-planning for long-term care. And that can mean things like putting a care plan in place. That can mean things like, getting long-term care insurance, putting trusts together. There's all different, every individual is different. But one of the main things that I stress to people, especially when they're a little bit younger, um, is, and even if they're a little bit older, they can still do this, but is to financial plan. It is extremely important to have a competent financial planner in place, and that's why I partner with competent financial planning firm like Telemus, um, because they know what they're doing, they're sensitive to the issue, and they can help people build wealth and protect assets, so that if a disaster does come, it makes things easier. So, Oliver, what are some of the things that you guys do at Telemus to prevent this type of situation?
Sure. Well, one thing we try and do, our founder, one of our founders, Gary Rand, he always talks about, if you were to walk across the street and get hit by a bus tomorrow, what does that world look like, right? So financial planning is, a tool in the toolbox. And as exactly as you said, each situation is specific to each individual. You really can't, put a blanket statement on anything or anyone. So what we'll do is we'll really try and get an understanding of people's sensitivities or goals. If their goal is to work towards a second home, or my favorite is always buy a boat, then we'll actually try and factor that in. On the more responsible side of things, if we've got clients that are inclined to ask us to say, we've got some medical concerns, how should we kind of plan ahead for this? We'll take those situations into account, and try and plan accordingly. Obviously, you can never be 100% certain about what may transpire in the future, but we really try and work hard to make sure that we uncover a lot of those details during the financial planning process. It's a really important process for us as we begin working with our clients.
Thanks. Yeah, and I agree 100% with that. I sometimes I say this tongue in cheek, but sometimes I think I really shouldn't even have a job in some of these situations, because a lot of times I'm helping people during scrambling times of going through what I call the elder law or the elder care maze. They're going from hospital to nursing home to assisted living to home. There's money, there's a financial advisor, there's a CPA. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to just have a plan in place, even if it's a very basic plan, even if you don't have a ton of assets. But if you have more, then of course, it should. But and a lot of my clients that do have built some wealth and have good planning, they do have estate planning and they do have some stuff. But a lot of times it's not really tailored towards getting sick or what happens if they lose capacity, and specifics about that. So I always say it's good to take an extra look at that. Now, another option that we use for people in the pre-planning realm is trust. So essentially a trust is really a book of instructions. It's creating a separate entity that you've created on your own, and it has instructions in it, and it's its own operating. I like to compare it to like a business. You've created this separate thing from yourself. And there's three positions in a trust. My mom used to create them all the time. She just didn't realize it. She'd send me and my brothers to the park, and she'd say, Brandon, here's $5. Go take your brothers. Go get some hot dogs. Do something. Go play. My mom was the grantor. Now I'm holding the $5, and I'm going to spend it, but it's not mine. I have very specific instructions on what to do with it. I'm the trustee. But now in this situation, I'm actually going to play two positions, because I'm going to get some food and I'm going to skate or play at the park or whatever I'm doing. So I'm a beneficiary as well. So always remember, in a trust, there's three positions: the grantor, the creator, the trustee, the person who's managing it, and then the people that benefit from the trust. Quickly, revocable trusts are great planning tools when it comes to estate planning. They avoid probate. They make sure that your wishes are followed. There's all kinds of great options post-death. And you can stay trustee while you're alive. The problem with Medicaid planning or pre-planning is a revocable trust is the property in that revocable trust, because you're the trustee and the grantor, can be treated as your property. So you can't say to a creditor or to the state of Michigan, oh, that house that's in my trust, that shouldn't be counted. Well, if it's a revocable trust, it can. So a lot of times we're planning with irrevocable or irrevocable trust. And in this situation, it has to have its own tax ID number, and it's irrevocable, and somebody else has to be the key holder, I call it, or it's like a treasure chest. You put stuff into that, you lock it up, You start the 5-year clock. Now, somebody can still access it. It just can't be you, the trust maker. It has to be a trusted family member or a professional. And the idea behind it is if you can't directly go into that trust and pull assets out and you don't have access to it, then the state cannot count it as an asset for you, or they can't get at it because you can. So a lot of times in pre-planning situations, we're using what I'll call an asset protection trust to move certain assets into a trust to make sure we just protect those if that's something that absolutely somebody says the minimum is I don't want to lose this chunk of money or this lake house up north. So we just, if I get sick, I can't lose that. And that's usually where it's appropriate to use one of those asset protection trusts. And I think we're up to the point of taking questions, but like I always say, I always offer free consultations to review people's needs, or just to take an extra look at estate plans and see if they are tailored towards an elder law outlook. And if you have no plan, no financial planner, or a attorney, just please go see one, get some things in place so it'll save people, your family members, a lot of stress in the long run.
Well, that's great. First of all, thank you, Brandon. Honestly, it's been a pleasure having you on with us today. I know that several people have already sent me little messages saying that they're finding it interesting, or more importantly, applicable. So like you said, typically at this time, we're going to open up the floor for some questions. So we've actually got Matt Rand. He's on with us. He's the recently promoted Director of Growth and Development here at Telemus. And I think Matt might jump on if he's seen some questions rolling in or if he's got some queued up.
Yeah, have 4 right now, and hopefully we'll get a few more. So first question is, I have a parent who's stubborn about a lot of this stuff. What are some easy ways to bring this stuff up?
Yeah, so that is a great question, Matt. I deal with that question very often. I want to help mom and dad. I heard you talking, or I've been reading stuff, on the newspaper, online. I want to figure it out. Well, the best advice I can give in that situation, and everybody's an individual and everybody's different, is you never want to approach somebody who's changed your diapers or raised you and try to tell them what to do or dictate to them. Dad or mom, you got to do this, or you have to do that. You have to see this lawyer. You have to go to Telemus and make these changes, or because that's usually not going to work if somebody's already stubborn. So I usually just try to say, little spoonfuls at a time. Hey, Dad, if something were to happen to you, what do you want? What are your end of life decisions? Or, who do you want to get your stuff? Or is there anything important to you that you want everybody to know? Just little things like that. And discussing death and illness is very hard, but it's just a fact of life nowadays. I can tell you it's a lot harder on the other end if you don't plan and something bad happens. So that's usually how I advise clients, is to try not to dictate to them and take over. Just give them the options to make those calls and come to you about it.
Got it. If my dad is a veteran, what are some programs we should explore to make sure he's using all the available benefits?
Good question. So, the VA splits their benefits into service-connected benefits and non-service-connected benefits. So most of the time, I'm focusing on people with non-service-connected benefits, because what that means is they've served in the military, but they weren't directly injured or harmed because of their military service. So they're having issues that aren't connected to their military service: dementia, Alzheimer's, stroke. So the main benefit that I usually tell people to look at, like I said earlier, is the pension benefit with aid and attendance. That really helps people get some good care in, up to about $2,200 a month you can get for home care, and that's a very little known benefit that a lot of people don't know about. So I'd say look into the pension benefit for aid and attendance. It's a great one.
Another one is the transfer to irrevocable trusts subject to the 5-year look-back rule.
Good question, and yes. So think of an irrevocable trust as a separate person. So it's like you created this separate taxable entity, like a business, that you can put assets to. So yes, if you move assets into an asset protection trust, it will count as what the state will call a divestment. So the idea is we try to move these assets into these trusts beforehand, get that 5-year clock going, and then once that's up, then it's protected in there, and we don't have to worry about it at that point.
All right, and then
All right.
Last question is, what are some of the main things to consider when thinking about elder care?
Main things to consider. So real quick, I mean, everybody's different, everybody's individual plans, but I like to say, 3 basic things real quick. I can't stress enough having good tailored powers of attorney. A lot of times in the past, they're considered throwaway documents. They're just easy documents. Any lawyer can do them. You just print them off and fill out the blanks. It's not like that anymore. You got to make sure they're very specific and very tailored to your needs. So those are really important. And then I would just say the main points are just think about what you would want to happen to you or your assets if you were to get sick down the road, and start thinking about if you'd want to protect the assets, or just even what kind of care you'd want to receive. So just think about it and talk to a good elder law attorney about it.
And with that, we're actually going to wrap it up for the afternoon. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here this afternoon. If you are interested in learning more about anything that we covered in this presentation today, please reach out to us. You can visit us either by visiting telemus.com, that's TELEMUS.com, or by visiting theprobatepro.com. And that is what we had for today. We appreciate everyone's time. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.